All right, so first up, it'd be good to understand how you ended up in the IT industry. Some of the folks I've talked to, it was what they'd always kind of wanted to do since a young age, and others, they ended up there by accident. So it'd be interesting to know which one of those is your story.
Yeah, I think for me, probably more by accident. So yeah, I mean, I actually started my life more in the sports industry. So my degree actually is in sports science from Loughborough. So yeah, I probably would describe my former self as a little bit of a tech phobe. And I think anyone that's probably spent any time around me knows about my sporting life. So yeah, I'd probably say to you, Phil, don't spend too much time talking because I'll have you signed up for a marathon before you know it. But yeah, I sort of fell into the tech industry, really, is probably the best way of describing it. I was actually put on a secondment to work on London 2012 with a former employer that was actually an official supplier to the Olympics and Paralympics, which for me was just like, oh, dream role, you know, working with BOA and LOCOG and athletes, both Olympic and Paralympic. And I kind of came out of that 12 months of kind of, actually, do you know what? I've learned so much. I've spoken to different people and just wanted to do something different. So I put my CV out speculatively, and that was how I found myself into tech. Really, I had an interview with a company called Ultima Business Solutions, so very much kind of like a relationship style role, working with key vendors such as Microsoft. And that's where I've been for the last 8 to 9 years, and I've absolutely loved it. So yeah, I've really enjoyed the industry, and I think interesting when I actually left the fitness industry, as everyone was, oh no, you'll find tech really boring and you won't be successful, etc., because, you know, sport is your world. And actually for me, I think, you know, I've probably found anything but, and I've just really loved the industry, the people, and, you know, hopefully a success in the industry as well. So
okay, and in terms of how you actually arrived at Ascent and what you do there, it'd be good to understand from when you started out. You know, have you worked for a few companies or just a couple? You know, what's the journey been like?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd spent probably 5 to 6 years with Ultima. So, you know, really friendly company. And again, just was that kind of like just felt the right time to move. So I've probably worked for a couple of different partners. So some small, more recently into the corporate world. So ran the go-to-market for Citrix in the UK and I for Microsoft. So one of Microsoft's 4 strategic ISVs. So that was quite interesting, going from sort of small partner into vendor in essence, as to kind of how the differences between the two, sort of pros and cons, I guess, on both sides. And then more recently, I guess sort of just coming up for 2 years, Ascent approached me, and I guess the attraction for moving out, because obviously that was during the pandemic, so I was a little bit hesitant at first as to kind of like, oh, you know, maybe from that sort of risk averse of better staying where I am, but actually sort of spoke to the CCO. I think he probably tried to kind of like, oh no, we'll have a conversation about 5 times before I finally said yes. But yeah, just really ambitious. I think the focus that they've got with Microsoft, which is, you know, where my focus has been in the Microsoft partner ecosystem for 8 to 9 years. And it was just that kind of, actually just something felt right. You know, the company, the culture, the ambition. I'm quite a competitive person. So I think that, you know, the company sort of matched me in essence. And yeah, I've really enjoyed being at Ascent ever since. So.
Okay, and in terms of challenges, I mean, with your sports background, it'd be interesting to compare and contrast, you know, what challenges you found in the sports world and whether any of those were related to, you know, to the fact that you're a woman in sport. And then, you know, now you've got into the IT space again. Have you experienced broadly similar sort of attitudes, challenges, or the different ways they treat women? In, you know, just some insights as to, yeah, what's been going on there.
Yeah, I think probably from a personal perspective, and it was actually feedback that I got from a senior leader, male senior leader actually, in one of the companies that I worked for within tech, was actually, I'm my own worst enemy at sort of limiting myself. So I kind of create my own glass ceiling. And that had always stayed with me, of kind of like, well, actually, you know, I was always, you know, my competitive life, you know, I'll always push myself and push boundaries, and you're always trying to go for quicker times or longer distances. And I'm actually reading a book at the moment that inspired Kipchoge, the current marathon world record holder, around heroic individualism. So where actually from, conventional standards, you're seen as successful, but as an individual, you always just kind of think you're not good enough. And I was just like, oh my goodness, that feels like me. So I think that's something that's probably been a personal challenge that I've had to get over, and probably would equate in both the sport and the tech industries. I think potentially aligned with that would be, I guess, the lack of female role models at the sort of senior leadership level or CX level. I mean, I know within the investors portfolio that Ascent falls into, I think there's about 15 companies, but there's only one female within a CXO level. And I think, I was speaking with one of our female data scientists this morning, and I think that's something that she struggles with within the industry, that it's like, actually, aspirationally, there's no one that looks like me above me. So it's kind of like, where do I go? How do I get there? What's the roadmap? And I think, that's something, probably my competitive head on, I look at with a kind of like, well, that's a challenge. How do I get there? What can I forge my own path? So kind of tried to turn that into quite a positive thing. I suppose more recently, over the last 2 years or so, sort of the age that I am, is actually kind of dealing with the sort of female changes from a hormonal perspective. So sort of perimenopause, menopause, and the impact that that's had, not only, I guess, from a personal perspective and has impacted my sporting life outside of work, but actually the impact that that's had from a work perspective as well. So, sort of waking up and in essence not knowing what your body is going to do from one day to the next. But I think for me, it's just that kind of the impact that it's had from a cognitive perspective. So, I think, I don't know, maybe a sweeping generalization, but, if you say menopause, you probably think of hot flushes and, women that, you're turning red or sweating. But, it's really been that kind of, the memory, the concentration levels, sort of mood swings, and that inability to, in essence, deal with stressful situations that actually I used to be okay with. And having to have that conversation in quite a male dominated industry, my line manager is male, that it's just that kind of, I've got to say something about this, because it's just, you kind of think, oh, maybe it's just me, I'm just having a bad day, or, it just is that I didn't get enough sleep, so I can't remember something. But, I've always been someone that's prided myself on my memory, or, people's names and things like that. And it was really being noticeable of just that. I can remember being in an exec meeting, and it's just that all of a sudden it just someone's name fell out of my head, and I was just like, oh god, my boss is going to think I haven't prepared, and all those things. And you can like sometimes thank goodness for the hybrid world that we live in, that I can have post-it notes like taped everywhere. And so yeah, I think that's been quite a challenge at the moment. And I think just being open and admitting that and talking about it and normalizing the conversation. I think I'd started it with just a post on LinkedIn with just a kind of like, I thought it was just me, and just listed, the anecdotes, and the amount of females that messaged me privately or commented on the post. It was just like, oh my goodness, yeah, I'm going through the same thing, or I've had this, or how do we have the conversation, or what's worked with you? And that's really been a kind of like, wow, this is a problem at the moment. I mean, I appreciate there's a lot more people talking about it and the Davina McCall effect, etc. But I mean, I feel that I've actually been quite fortunate, and the males that I work around have actually been quite understanding. But yeah, it just is that actually, how can we make that a broader thing within, I guess, the tech industry and other industries?
Okay, yeah. So in general, it sounds as if when you've encountered these issues where you thought you've got them and you maybe haven't, whatever, but you've been supported pretty well by people, whether they were male or female, to help you address the situations. You haven't come across any much negativity in terms of those kind of issues.
No, yeah, I mean, I think one thing I would say of my experience within the tech industry is that I've had a lot of male allies, and actually it's probably been more male colleagues that have pushed me on or encouraged me to go for various things. I mean, I worked for a CMO when I was at Red Pixie, which were acquired into HPE, and like he knew that I was kind of like, oh, media things or standing up presenting or anything like that. I was just like, oh no, I hate it. And he had an invite from IDC actually to be one of the guest speakers at a dinner, and he was just like, no, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to pass it on to you. And I looked and I was just like, oh, I can't do that. And it was a 5-minute overview on, I can't even remember now and what it was, but I sort of did the preparation. I kind of thought, no, I'll do it as a storytelling, and actually resonated the story to sport. I think it was actually Dave Brailsford and the kind of what he was doing with the Sky team at the time. And the amount of feedback that I got from the people in the room is kind of like, oh, well, that was really interesting. You were really engaging. And I came back and I was just like, oh, I can do this. And he was just like, see, told you. And I think, it's been things like that where if someone hadn't put me forward and, on the whole, it's been male, then, I guess some of the opportunities that I've had, I just wouldn't have done. So yeah, sort of very grateful for the males that I've had around me. So.
And in terms of any sort of, you've been in the industry for a while, are there any things you think that obviously need improving, or you still bump into and think, oh, wish that wasn't there or whatever? Or overall, do you think the industry's fairly enlightened when it comes to diversity and therefore not too much to worry about?
I think there's always more that can be done. There's been some interesting reports. I was actually reading one by McKinsey actually yesterday evening around, I think it's their Women in the Workplace 2022. And, I think post-pandemic, I think women have probably come back in a little bit more empowered and actually sort of pushing for change and asking for change. And I think, where there's that, I think they called it the great breakup. So, where it's kind of actually where you've had 2 years where, I guess most people were working from home in the tech industry where they could, as to kind of actually that, and I don't think anyone's got the silver bullet as to kind of like what the new working world looks like, but, where it's kind of like, well, actually, working from home gives me the opportunity to balance that work-life balance and looking for the flexibility. And I think putting more of a premium on actually, can I have that time to balance everything that I do in my personal life as well as the work environment, because I can be equally as successful and not having to go back into the office. And I think also putting the focus on, I guess, as you say, that cultural element, inclusion and diversity, because I think, there's a lot of females that do that without being recognised for it. And I think, it's kind of actually being in companies that do take those issues and agendas seriously, and making sure that actually we are driving an inclusive society for everybody. And I think some of the issues that we encounter, I mean, I touched on the menopause piece, but that isn't just a female issue. That can affect men that are going through cancer treatment, anyone that's going through gender affirmation, and males will have wives, girlfriends, sisters, partners, etc., that will be going through it at the same time. And I think it's just empowering people to have an understanding and a level of empathy to kind of actually, everyone, and women are ambitious, they are capable of doing a great job. It just is sometimes you need to think about actually what they're going through and just provide that level of support and retain that sort of top level of talent. I mean, there's some really scary statistics around sort of females that have left the workplace because of either like lack of support with menopause or actually the symptoms themselves. I think Bupa had put a report out in 2019. I think it was around 1 million females had left the workplace in the UK, and just think, oh, that that's an amazing amount of talent that's walking out of the door, and how much it costs to recruit back in. So yeah, I think there is a lot more that can be done, and some of the initiatives that we're looking at from an Ascent perspective. I actually sort of relaunched our Women at Ascent, and actually the M in women is a capital M, just because we wanted to encourage male allies to really help us move the needle in that space. And actually it's our CEO, Stuart, that is the exec sponsor for that, and really proactive in the discussions that we're having. So looking at things as, flexible work options, a real focus on returnships. So what are females looking at that are coming back into the industry that have had a career break for whatever reason? Potentially looking to trial sort of billable rate cards. So, how can we actually make that a bit more flexible for females, and, will that fit our customer base? Signing the workplace menopause pledge. So, actually we are a menopause friendly employer. We do understand that, and putting the kind of, the training and the enablement and the support networks that go in behind that. So, I think it's just that kind of, the more voices that we have behind these kind of things, I think, the more change will happen for the better. So.
Okay, and in terms of, obviously you told us you started in sport and then you've crossed over to the IT. So for folks watching this, that whether they're school leavers or coming towards the end of further education, or indeed people in a career but looking at the IT industry, because the world is, digital, isn't it? So there's so many opportunities, and talking to someone earlier this morning, virtually every business in a way is an IT business, because there's usually something within the organization that's pretty important, related to IT. So what sort of advice would you give to folks, that are, as I say, in either of those scenarios, whether sort of education, looking where to go, or perhaps looking at IT? What's how you got into it one way, but what should they be looking at, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one thing, I guess, from actually specifically a female perspective, is a program that I'd gone through, is investing time in yourself. So I actually went through a Women Rising initiative earlier this year. So it's a 6-month module that focuses, it's a holistic personal and professional development program, something that I'd never really done before, but, actually really focused your mind. And I guess it's something that if you're looking to elevate your career, give you confidence within a male environment, hand on heart was probably the best thing that I've ever done. And now acting as a mentor for other females in our business that are going through the same thing. And I think if I'd had the opportunity to do that probably at the beginning of my career in the IT industry, then I think I probably would have had the confidence to maybe push a few more boundaries, or ask certain questions, or shape my career a little bit better. So, I think that is the one thing that I'd probably say to, I guess it could be male or female, to be honest, but, really invest time in you and understand yourself and the direction you want to go in, and have the courage and empowerment to shape your own career. And probably outside of that is, the big thing at the moment is, upskill yourself. And there's loads of certifications, whether it be Microsoft or, any other tech vendors that we're looking at, of just, that knowledge is power in essence. And, if you're looking to come into tech, there's so many positions and different roles that you can do, whether you want to work in data and be a technical facing resource, or, more like me, who's a relationship role. And I think it's probably really opened up my eyes as I've moved through the 8-9 years that I've been in the industry, is to kind of actually what is open to you when you come into the tech industry. It isn't sort of, all about engineers, or, having to have a science degree, or, whatever. It's just that kind of like, it can be such a rewarding industry, no matter what you do in it. So yeah, to be anyone, I would just say is just like, go for it and be bold and be brave, and see where it takes you.
And do you think it's easy for people to identify the type of company, the company culture? Whether you go to their website or whatever, or is it only when you do actually arrive in a company you then understand, what their values are? Or, as I say, can you, as part of the job seeking process, get to understand the potential employee you might be working for?
I think now a lot more companies are putting more focus on that area when they're looking at recruiting talent. And I think there's probably more people, God, it's going to make me sound old, of a younger generation, that ask the questions specifically around that, of, whether it's working from home, or sustainability initiatives, or, women in tech initiatives, etc. And even for me, if I was to sort of onward look at my next step from Ascent, it's just like, I would probably do as much research into the cultural aspect of the company as well as their financial performance, because, it's really important from my perspective to work for a company that actually has the same moral standing and beliefs as I do. And I think it's probably one of the reasons where I've really enjoyed working in a supportive role with Microsoft, and in essence they're my key customer in the role that I do, because of all the societal challenges that they support and initiatives that they have. I appreciate large corporate, and they are kind of North Star of where we should be aiming at, but it was really pleasing to see them put out a partner pledge. God, that was probably sort of 2 or 3 years ago, if not longer, but where it was in essence a memorandum of expectation for the partners that work in the Microsoft ecosystem, that's supporting sort of digital skills, ethical and responsible AI, sustainability initiatives. And I think it just is, as I say, sort of creating that community of partners and companies that actually want to do good in the world, as well as obviously make money. So I think it's, again, probably post-pandemic is something that people look at a lot more now, because I think, you've had that taste of kind of like, well, this is what life was like during those 2 years. And actually, it's really important to kind of keep that as we move forward. So.
Okay, and maybe just as we finish, is there one or a couple of things, you know, you worked in the industry for a while, you think, oh, I wish we could do this, or I wish the industry would do that? Is there anything, or do you think it evolves fairly well, or as I say, are there any glaring things you think, wow, they need to do this, or stop doing that? Just a matter of interest.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, and probably, you know, just pulling on my own personal experience, you know, being the age that I am now, although I appreciate from a hormonal perspective, it can happen at any age, is, you know, I would really encourage employees to look at menopause policies and becoming menopause friendly. You know, I think there is the potential that menopause will become a protected characteristic. So, you know, from a legal perspective, companies will probably have to do something. But I think it's amazing the difference that that can make to, you know, the massive pool of female talent that you've got, you know, maybe sort of 40s, 50s, even going into the 30s, of kind of actually letting females know that it's kind of like, you know, you can have that conversation, you're supported, there's flexible work options. You know, because if all companies obviously want to attract and retain the best talent, and, you know, there's a big talent pool there, and it can make a real difference. You know, the sort of females that I talk to, and, you know, what I've seen at Ascent and within our portfolio with the investor that we work with, of the companies that are now talking about this and implementing it, and it's really refreshing to see. And I think that if that's one thing that I could ask companies to do, I was just that, you know, please, because it does make such a difference.
Okay. Well, it's been lovely to chat to you, Nicki. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you.